everybody, it's Stephanie from Rebalance. We're here today just to talk a little bit about running form. We get asked a lot of questions about what's good running form and how do you know what to look for when you're running to be able to use optimal form. There's a lot of things that play into that, but I want to give you 3 simple things to think about. One is your base of support. So where are your feet falling relative to your hips? Some people tend to run a little bit almost scissor-like, that when they're running, their feet are kind of falling very close to each other. And you might notice this if your knees tend to brush when you're running, if your knees tend to knock. Sometimes it might mean that your base of support is a little too close together. It also might mean that there's a little bit of weakness in your hips, but for the sake of argument, we're going to talk about where your feet are landing. So if your feet land underneath your hips when you're running, you tend to have more ability to use your hip muscles, as opposed to if your feet are more close to the center midline of your body, it makes it harder for your hip muscles to work and to fire and give you that support. So that's one little tip. Try to keep your feet underneath the base of support of your hips. Something else that we're going to look at is where are your feet falling when you go to land? There's all kinds of question whether somebody should land on their forefoot, the front of their foot, or strike their heel when they go to land. Now what some of the discussion is actually coming to an agreement that it might not matter where you land on what part of your foot, but how far your foot is landing in front of you. So if people are running and they're striking their foot way ahead of their body, that can cause you to use compensatory strategies, maybe overuse your hamstrings, or it makes it a little bit harder for your core to be as active in your running form than it would be if you were a little bit more angled. So I'm running right now, or I'm positioning myself as if I was leaning into the wind a little bit, or in a ski jump position, or like I was running almost just on a little bit of an angle. When I do that, my foot's going to tend to land underneath me or just slightly in front of me rather than too far ahead. And then when I go to swing back my leg behind me, it's going to let me use my hip muscles a little bit more efficiently. So where your feet are landing relative to your hips, but also where they're landing relative to your body in general, just underneath or maybe just a little bit 5 degrees ahead of your body is usually a good position for your feet. And the way that you can help to kind of remind yourself of that is let myself lean a little bit forward so that my ribs are falling over my pelvis, as opposed to my pelvis kind of leading the motion and being in front of the rib cage, so that there I'm kind of angled back as opposed to being a little bit more upright or just a little bit forward. The third little tip that we can kind of talk about as far as running form is concerned is where are your arms? So if you're swinging through the plane of your body that's this way, you're going to tend to be more efficient. You're trying to go in this direction, so you want your arm momentum to be using energy in that plane of motion. A lot of times you'll see people and their elbows kind of are sticking out a little bit when they're running, or their arms are crossing their body a lot. What we want to actually do is see that there's rotation going on in the trunk, but that the arms are swinging through that nice plane of the body that's going in that direction. So if you notice that you're a runner who tends to run with your arms out, or you tend to swing your arms quite a bit, maybe that's a little bit of a compensation for some weakness in somewhere else like your core or your hips. And it might be something to be evaluated either with your physical therapist or with another practitioner who could at least say, let's take a look at that form and see if there's some things that we can improve on in terms of your strength to actually help your running form. I ask all of my runners who I treat on a regular basis, what do you do on a regular basis to work on your running form? And these are some of the tips that I talk to with them, and there's many others. So if you have questions and you are interested in maybe talking about this with one of us, give us a call and we'd be happy to talk to you about how you might be able to improve not only your form, but actually your performance. A lot of these things will really help your efficiency and your actual running performance. Thanks a lot.